Pro Savings Days are back at Lowe's with limited time savings on the supplies pros need. Get up to 40% off select major appliances. Plus, save an additional $100 on every $1,000 you spend on select major appliances. And don't miss your chance to activate and earn 3 times the points on select DeWalt and Klein tools. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 3/28. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See associate or Lowe's.com for more details on qualifying items.
The House Oversight and Government Reform Committee is just one congressional group considering ways to cut federal spending, including employee benefits, to save tens of billions of dollars over the next few years. Certified financial planner Thiago Gleger joins me with what he's concerned about, and you are looking specifically at House Oversight and Government Reform. Lots of changes to what feds are used to in their paychecks. What are some of the highlights here?
That's right, Tom. There's a lot of things being proposed here that I think federal employees are really going to want to pay some close attention to. The first thing that we're looking at is raise to the FERS contribution rate. So depending on when you were hired, you might pay either 0.8% of your salary, 3.1% of your salary, or 4.4% if you were hired in 2014 or later. So the majority of the workforce is still under that lower contribution rate of their salary to the FERS pension, which is the annuity that you get upon retirement. And so if we're talking about an increase from 0.8% to 4.4%, that's a pretty substantial jump, because that's essentially, I don't want to call it a tax, but it's going to feel like a tax to people, where suddenly you have that much less income that's coming to you because it's being pulled straight from your paychecks.
Right. That contribution jumped during the Obama administration for people hired at that point. They grandfathered in earlier employees, and people see it as a pay cut, even though the annuity was not cut. It's just that you pay more towards your annuity. And I guess depending on the employee point of view, it feels like a cut because you have less to take home.
That's right. And the big concern with pensions in general is the idea that humans are living longer. And so the longer we live, the longer the draw is on those forms of pension and guaranteed income. This is the issue with Social Security, although it is a totally different system. So that's the thought behind why this contribution is being increased.
Yes, and most organizations outside of government have gone to defined contribution plans totally. And defined benefit is almost a thing of the past unless you have a union pension.
That's exactly right. We have some folks who are private sector employees, and very few of them, as to your point, only the ones that have unions are really looking at any form of defined benefit pension plans.
Right. And by the way, I applied for Social Security last night, and I'm going to see if it takes them 30 days like they promise. And it's not too horrible a process, but you don't.
No, they've gotten it pretty down, and new updated systems work well now.
You just hope ID.me is never hacked, or that's the end of the game at that point.
Right.
And then eliminate the FERS supplemental retirement payments could save $13 billion in 10 years. What's going on with that one?
This is a big one, Tom. So what the FERS supplemental annuity is essentially if you are leaving federal service as a retiree prior to the age of 62. If you remember, 62 is the first eligible age for Social Security. So this benefit is something that federal employees exclusively used to receive and still do receive. And the idea is that from 57 all the way to 62, you have this bridge of, hey, you're retired, you don't have an income anymore, but you're not quite old enough to access Social Security. So this benefit was there to equate roughly 75% of your Social Security benefit. And for potentially 5 years that you were getting this additional income. Obviously, the amount is going to vary depending on what your Social Security benefit was. But to give people a rough idea, probably somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 per year if you are kind of a DMV earner for average salaries around here. And over 5 years, that's close to $100,000 in less income that a federal retiree could expect. Obviously, if we're talking about any of the 1811s or other special provisions, they retire a whole lot sooner than that. So it could be many more years before they're looking at that supplement. So this is a big one, and federal retirees are going to need to account for where are we going to make that income if our salary goes away, and so does this benefit.
Right. That is, again, for people that retire early. So that would make them rethink that option if they're physically able to, I guess.
That's right. You know, it's not a tremendous amount of income, but it's very, very helpful. It's not negligent. And so people might consider just staying a little bit longer. until 62 at least, because then we're looking at the 10% bonus as well as Social Security availability.
And you could always become a barista for those 5 years, I guess. We're speaking with certified financial planner Thiago Gleger of RMG Advisors. And the one that really has people, I think, up in arms when they hear about it is the FERS benefit based on the high 5 years of work instead of the high 3, which is effectively presuming you get a raise every year. It lowers it.
It does, just by the way that averages work, right? If we're including more years into the average calculation, and they are years that are prior to your final last 3 years, then we are effectively looking at a lower base salary for your calculation. This is really going to make a bigger impact for anybody that gets promoted within those 5 years, because the promotion is going to be a bigger jump. That'll help in the overall calculation, but I would expect at least a few $1,000s in a reduction of overall pension. And, someone might look at that and say, all right, well, I'm getting $3,000 or $4,000 less per year, so that's not a complete game changer. The issue in that thinking is we have to remember that the cost of living adjustments are based on that calculation that's now lower. So if you factor in 30 years of a retirement times how many thousand less you're receiving, plus the reduction of the COLA for how many years, because it's now based on a lower pension, what is the actual lump sum value of less dollars you're receiving in retirement? That could be 6 figures in many cases.
Sure, yes. And also in inflationary times, which do come and go, right now they're sort of going, but it could return at any time, it accelerates that feeling of loss of buying power, or it accelerates the loss of buying power itself, not just the feeling.
Right. And people then have to draw more heavily from their TSPs, or to your point, get a side income of sorts to really help support their lifestyle as they move forward.
And the estimate for that change would be $4 billion over 10 years. I mean, we're not talking things that affect the government that much, but they sure do affect the people affected. And another one that's even smaller, but again, they're considering this. This is real legislative thoughts, is to enact Federal Employee Health Benefit Protection Act, H.R. 7868. And that would do what?
This one is mostly just trying to make sure that we don't have people in the system taking FEHB that are not really supposed to be taking it. This one, I think, is going to be less impactful to folks because the reality is most federal employees are really including their spouses, maybe their children up to about 26. And so in this case, they're just looking to see where else are there people that shouldn't be receiving benefits that might be currently from the system.
And should all this come to pass, and it's not a done deal yet necessarily, I mean, these proposals have come up periodically over the years, what is a good strategy for your life then if you think that maybe retirement benefits will just be simply lower? I would guess you'd say make sure you keep that TSP contribution as high as you can possibly stand.
That's right, Tom. One of the best things people can do is to take control over their own financial independence. Yes, federal employees have incredible benefits. They will continue to have incredible benefits, even if they are reduced. But the number one thing you can do is pay yourself first. Make sure you're looking at those TSP contributions every year if you are not yet maximizing. Every raise that you get, split that raise in half. Pay yourself half of the raise and pay your TSP the other half of the raise. If you still have a lot of time before retirement, consider being a little bit more aggressive in the portfolio. The funds like CS&I funds are very growth-oriented, but we have to remember that the price we pay for growth is volatility in the short term. So you have to factor that volatility in as well.
What do they say? You're poor if you work for money, and you're rich if money works for you.
That's exactly